Hooky had one train to catch, one single chance to make it to the most important interview of his entire life. The silver cars of the 8:15 Express weren't just gleaming metal and glass. They were a vessel, a shimmering promise of his future. But as the final, urgent boarding call echoed through the cavernous station, a voice crackling with impatience, he deliberately turned his back on it all. He was about to miss his only shot, a shot he had scraped and bled and prayed for. He wasn't doing it for money or for fame, but for a small, older woman who had looked at him with pure, undiluted fear in her eyes. He stood frozen, watching his future pull away from the platform in a long, metallic sigh. Little did he know that single, seemingly catastrophic act of kindness was about to rewrite his destiny in a way he could never have possibly imagined. Section 1. The weight of a dream. Marcus Washington felt the crushing weight of his entire world pressing down on the worn, cracked leather strap of his portfolio case. It was heavy, not just from the cardstock and prints inside, but from the invisible burden it carried. Within that case wasn't just paper and ink. It was the physical manifestation of 1,000 sleepless nights, countless dinners of instant ramen noodles, and a dream so vivid, so fiercely held. It felt more real than the hard, unforgiving bench he was perched on. He was an architect, or at least, he desperately wanted to be. In the sanctuary of his mind, he wasn't a struggling job applicant. He was a master builder. He constructed soaring cathedrals of glass and steel that seemed to kiss the clouds, and designed community centers that pulsed with the vibrant energy of laughter and life. He could see the blueprints in his sleep, every last angle, every precise line etched onto the back of his eyelids. But in the harsh light of the real world, Marcus was running on fumes. The last few years had been a brutal, crushing series of almosts and not quiets. He had graduated with honors. The professional world, however, had proven to be a less than welcoming fortress. He felt like a man trying to pick a lock with a feather. The field was an exclusive club, a towering citadel, and he couldn't seem to find the secret handshake or the hidden key to get in. As if the professional struggle wasn't enough, life had thrown him a series of devastating curveballs. His mother's sudden illness had acted like a merciless siphon, straining his family's modest savings, and with it, his own spirit. He had unhesitatingly put his burgeoning career on hold for 2 whole years to become her primary caregiver. He took on a string of grueling, mind-numbing, odd jobs stocking shelves overnight, driving for a rideshare service until his eyes burned, landscaping under the hot sun, anything to pay for her escalating medical expenses. He didn't regret a single second of it. The quiet, precious hours spent reading classic novels to her, her hand resting lightly on his, were treasures he'd hold on to for the rest of his life. But after she passed, he was left standing in the wreckage. A mountain of medical debt and a gaping 2-year hole in his resume that felt impossible to explain to potential employers who saw it only as a liability. He felt like he was starting a marathon a dozen steps behind everyone else. With lead weights tied to his ankles, he'd scroll through social media and see former classmates, people he had tutored and collaborated with, posting glossy pictures of their first completed projects. Their lives were moving forward in a triumphant, uninterrupted line, while his felt hopelessly stuck in neutral. The rejection emails were a constant, stinging reminder of his stagnation. Each one was a small, sharp paper cut on his soul. We've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our needs. We're looking for someone with more practical, on-site experience. At this time, the words were always polite, corporate, and detached, but they all screamed the same thing: no, you are not enough. This interview, this one single meeting, was different. It was his lighthouse in a thick, disorienting fog. Sterling and Cross, a top-tier architectural firm, had a rare opening for a junior architect. The project they were hiring for was everything he'd ever dreamed of: a sustainable, mixed-use community hub designed to revitalize a neglected part of the city. It was architecture with a conscience. This was the final round, a summit he had reached after 3 grueling preliminary stages of tests and interviews. The train ticket alone had cost him nearly the last of his savings. A final, desperate bet on himself. His sister, Lisa, had pressed a crumpled wad of cash into his hand just before he left for the station. "This is for me and Mom," she'd said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "She would be so incredibly proud of you, Marcus. Look how far you've come. Get it. This is your time." The pressure felt immense, almost suffocating. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was for his mom's memory, for his sister's unwavering belief in him, and for himself. To finally prove to the world and to his own gnawing self-doubt that the dream wasn't just a childish fantasy, failure this time wasn't an option. He rechecked his watch, the cheap plastic cool against his skin. The train was due in 5 minutes. Absolutely everything depended on his getting on it. The train station was a symphony of controlled chaos, a living, breathing organism of hurry and purpose. Announcements crackled over the intercom system, the words garbled and metallic. A river of people scurried past, a blur of faces and trench coats, dragging wheeled suitcases that rattled and clattered across the polished granite floor. Marcus stood apart from the primary current, an island of stillness in the rushing tide, clutching his portfolio to his chest like a shield. He recited the critical details in his head one last time. It's a mantra against the rising panic, Sterling and Cross, 34th floor, 11 a.m. sharp. Be ready to discuss the portfolio, especially the community-focused designs. Show passion. Show them you live and breathe this. A sharp metallic screech sliced through the air, a sound that made his heart leap. This is it. He saw the silver gleam of the 8:15 Express as it slid gracefully into the station. A majestic metal serpent coming to a halt. The door slid open with a powerful pneumatic hiss. An invitation to a different life. Final boarding call for the 8:15 Express, service to Westbrook. All passengers please board now. Track 4. The disembodied voice was clipped, urgent, and final. It was time. Marcus took a deep, steadying breath, adjusted the portfolio strap on his shoulder, and started moving toward the open doors of the train, the gateway to his future. And he saw her. She was an older woman, small and incredibly frail, her back stooped with age. She was wrestling with a large, old-fashioned suitcase that seemed to weigh more than she did. As she tried to hoist it over a small concrete lip in the pavement, her grip failed. The suitcase tipped, wobbled for a sickening moment, and then burst open with a dull, percussive thud. Her life, her history, spilled out across the grimy station floor. Stacks of yellowed letters tied together with faded red ribbon, brittle black and white photographs of people long gone. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, a soft hand-knitted baby blanket. It was a time capsule, shattered open for all to see. People glanced, some winced with sympathy. A few even shook their heads, but no one stopped. The river of commuters flowed around the wreckage, a momentary obstacle in their path. The woman let out a small, desperate cry, sound of pure helplessness, looking utterly lost and alone in the swirling chaos. Marcus froze. His mind screamed at him, a frantic, primal command. Go. The train. Your interview. Your life. He could see the conductors in their crisp uniforms, gesturing to each other, getting ready to close the doors. He had 30 seconds, 40 at most. He could still make it. He had to make it. He took a decisive step toward the train, his muscles tensing for the sprint. But then he looked back at the woman. She was on her hands and knees, her movements slow and pained, trying to gather the scattered photographs before they were trampled. As she looked up, her eyes clouded with panic and on the verge of tears met his. And in that instantaneous silent connection, he saw something that stopped him cold. He saw fear. Not just the fear of her immediate situation, but a more profound, more specific fear of him, as this tall, young black man stood over her, a shadow falling across her. She instinctively clutched her purse, pulling it protectively closer to her body. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, but it hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. It was a look he knew all too well. It's a subtle tensing of a stranger's shoulders on an elevator. The quick, darting glance in an empty street, the silent, split-second calculation of threat. It was unfair, exhausting, and in that precise moment, profoundly heartbreaking. She didn't see a man. She saw a stereotype. The train's horn blew, a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo the cry in his own soul. His future was screaming at him, beckoning him to hurry up. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of indecision, but he couldn't move. He looked at the closing doors, a closing window to his dreams. Then back at the woman's frightened face and her scattered precious memories strewn across the dirty floor. He thought of his own mother, of her grace and vulnerability in her final years, and how he would have prayed for a stranger's kindness to find her if she were ever in such a state. He knew exactly what she would have told him to do. With a deep, resigned sigh that felt like it carried the weight of his entire future, Marcus turned his back on the train. He set his portfolio down carefully, took a calming breath to steady his own racing heart, and walked toward the older woman, deliberately softening his features and offering a small, disarming smile. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle, trying to project nothing but safety. "Let me help you with that." The train pulled away with a low rumble that vibrated through the soles of Marcus's shoes and up into his very bones. He watched it go, a silver blur taking his hopes with it. The full weight of his decision crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. It was over. The interview, the job at Sterling and Cross, the one tangible chance to finally break free from the undertow of his circumstances, all of it, gone. A cold, sick feeling churned in the pit of his stomach, the bitter taste of failure rising in his throat. The older woman, whom he would soon learn was named Eleanor, looked up at him, her initial fear now completely replaced by a wide-eyed confusion. She watched as he knelt on the grimy floor, not with reluctance, but with a focused gentleness. He began carefully gathering the fragile fragments of her life. He handled the bundle of aged letters with a surprising reverence, as if they were sacred texts. He picked up the small wooden bird, its delicate wings miraculously intact. He brushed a speck of dirt from it before placing it safely back in the suitcase. Slowly, her apprehension melted away, replaced by a sense of awe at this stranger's quiet, unexpected grace. She saw not a threat, but a kindness so profound, so utterly selfless, that it left her speechless. This young man had just sacrificed something significant. She could feel it. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice raspy with emotion. You didn't have to." "The train." "It's no problem at all," Marcus replied, his own voice tight as he fought back the despair that was threatening to overwhelm him. He managed a weak, unconvincing smile as he carefully rearranged her belongings and latched the battered suitcase shut. "There you go. All safe and sound." He helped her to her feet, his hand gentle under her elbow. It was only then that she seemed to honestly notice the expensive-looking portfolio case sitting abandoned by the tracks, and the look of utter devastation that had settled on his face. "Young man," she said, her gaze sharpening with a sudden shrewd intelligence. "You were running for that train, weren't you?" It was important. Marcus could only nod, a fresh wave of hopelessness washing over him. "I had an interview," he said, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. "The most important interview of my life." Eleanor's face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. "Oh, my dear boy," she breathed, her own hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of dismay. "Oh no, it was because of me." "It's okay," Marcus said, the lie tasting like poison. He slumped onto a nearby bench, the energy draining out of him until he felt hollowed out, exhausted to his bones. He pulled out his phone with a deep sense of dread. He had to make the call. It was the responsible thing to do, even if it was pointless. A crisp, possibly professional voice answered on the second ring. "Sterling and Cross, how may I direct your call?" He explained the situation as best he could, trying desperately not to sound like he was making a flimsy excuse, his voice cracking slightly. The response was as polite as it was, cold as steel. "I see, Mr. Washington. We appreciate your calling to inform us, but the partners have a rigorous and back-to-back schedule. I'm afraid we won't be able to reschedule the final round. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." And just like that, with a quiet click, the door to his future was slammed, bolted, and locked. Marcus ended the call and stared blankly at the dark screen of his phone. It was official. He had thrown it all away for nothing. Tears of frustration and grief pricked his eyes, and he blinked them back furiously. Refusing to break down in the middle of a crowded station, Eleanor sat down beside him, her presence a quiet, comforting apology. After a long moment of shared silence, she spoke, her voice suddenly firm, laced with an unexpected authority. "This is not right," she declared, her tone leaving no room for argument. "An act of decency like yours? A moment of true character. It cannot be for nothing. The world can't be that broken. What is your name, young man?"
I'm Marcus.
"Marcus Washington. And you're an architect?" she asked, gesturing with her chin toward his portfolio. He nodded numbly, unable to muster the energy to speak. Trying to be, he finally mumbled, "Let me have your number." "Marcus Washington," she insisted, pulling a small leather-bound notebook and an elegant fountain pen from her purse. He gave her his number, more out of a sense of politeness and exhaustion than anything else. What could this older woman possibly do? "I don't know how yet," she said, closing the notebook with a decisive snap and looking him directly in the eye, her gaze clear and intense. "But I promise you, I will find a way to make this right. Kindness like that is too rare in this world. It shouldn't go unrewarded." Marcus wanted to believe her. He truly did. But the cynicism born of long struggle was a rigid shield to lower. He had done the right thing, the thing his mother would have been proud of. The world had swiftly and decisively punished him for it. He helped her into a waiting taxi, and as it pulled away into the stream of city traffic, he stood alone on the curb. He had no interview, no train ticket, and not enough money for another one home. He turned and started the long, slow walk toward the distant bus station. His portfolio now feeling impossibly heavy, filled with the dead weight of a dream that had just died, he was at his lowest point. Utterly convinced his good deed had cost him everything he had ever worked for, but a powerful, unseen force had just been set in motion. If you believe that no act of kindness is ever truly wasted, please subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what happens next. The following 2 days passed in a gray, featureless blur. Marcus made it home on a long, rattling bus ride that gave him far too much time to replay every single second of his failure. The squeal of the train, the woman's gasp, the cold finality in the receptionist's voice, it all played on a torturous loop in his mind. His small apartment, usually his sanctuary, now felt like it was closing in on him, the walls pressing inward. He mechanically scrolled through online job boards. The duplicate tired listings for drafters and junior assistants, but his heart wasn't in it. The fire of hope that had fueled him for so long felt like it had been entirely extinguished, leaving behind nothing but cold ash. The older woman's promise, which had seemed so earnest at the station, now felt like a kind but empty gesture, a fairy tale whispered in a world that didn't believe in it. On the third afternoon, his phone rang, buzzing insistently on the coffee table. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Exhausted and unwilling to speak to anyone, he let it go to voicemail. A moment later, it buzzed again, this time with a notification for a new message. He listlessly tapped the screen, holding the phone to his ear with zero expectation. "Good afternoon," a polished professional voice began. "My name is Arthur Chen, and I am the executive assistant to the Senior Partners Advance Architectural Guild. I am calling for a Mr. Marcus." "Washington?" Marcus sat bolt upright, his lethargy vanishing in a surge of adrenaline. Vance Architectural Guild. VAG wasn't just a firm. It was a legend. It was the institution founded by the great Julian Vance, a titan of 20th century architecture, a man whose work Marcus had studied with religious devotion in college. Getting a job there wasn't like winning the lottery. It was like being invited to join the pantheon of the gods. It was an impossible dream. His heart began to pound against his ribs, a frantic, hopeful rhythm. He held his breath as he kept listening to the message. "Mr. Washington," the smooth voice continued, "I know this is highly unorthodox, but I'm reaching out at the personal recommendation of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. She has spoken very highly of you and the circumstances of your meeting, The senior partners would be very interested in speaking with you at your earliest convenience. Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, but he barely noticed. Eleanor Vance. Mrs. Eleanor Vance. It couldn't be. The frail, flustered older woman from the train station. He scrambled to his laptop, his fingers fumbling on the keyboard as he typed her name into the search bar. The results flooded the screen, and his world tilted on its axis. There she was, in dozens of photos from galas, museum openings, and university dedications, standing beside her late husband, the iconic Julian Vance. She was the majority shareholder and the revered, fiercely private matriarch of the Vance Architectural Guild. The woman who scattered black and white photos he had held in his hands was architectural royalty. He realized with a jolt of understanding that he hadn't just been holding family memories. He had been holding the personal effects of Julian Vance himself. The small wooden bird, the letters, the blanket, they were artifacts of a legendary life. His phone rang again. The same number. This time, he snatched it up, his voice barely a whisper. "This is Marcus Washington." "Ah, Mr. Washington," Arthur Chen said warmly, with no hint of confusion. "I'm glad I reached you. As I mentioned in my message, Mrs. Vance was deeply moved by your actions at the station. She shared the entire story with our senior partners this morning. Her husband, our founder, had a core philosophy that has guided this firm for 50 years. You can teach a person to design, but you cannot teach them integrity. Mrs. Vance believes you embody that philosophy." Marcus was utterly speechless. Unable to form a single word, "The partners would like to invite you to our offices tomorrow morning at 10, Arthur continued, his voice kind. "And please, don't think of this as an interview. They are more interested in having a conversation. To get to know the man who is willing to sacrifice a major opportunity for Anne, an act of simple human kindness." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. Hot and sudden, but this time they weren't tears of despair. There were tears of shock, relief, and a hope so overwhelming that it felt like a physical force. He had missed his train. He had lost the opportunity he thought would define his future. But in doing so, he had stumbled onto a different track entirely, one that led to a destination he hadn't even dared to dream of. The next morning, Marcus stood before the towering glass facade of the Vance Architectural Guild. The building itself was a masterpiece, a symphony of light, steel, and space that he had studied in textbooks. It didn't just occupy the block. It commanded it, projecting an aura of quiet genius. He smoothed down the front of his best suit for the 10th time, took a breath that did little to calm his racing heart, and walked through the revolving glass doors. He stepped into a vast, sunlit atrium that felt more like a cathedral dedicated to innovation than an office lobby. A massive, spiraling sculpture stretched 3 stories high, and the walls were lined with breathtaking architectural models. A smiling man in a perfectly tailored suit approached him immediately. "Mr. Washington, I'm Arthur Chen. It's a pleasure to meet you in person at last. The partners are ready for you, and someone else is very eager to see you again." He led Marcus past, hushed, busy design studios to a sweeping corner conference room with a panoramic view of the entire city. 3 distinguished-looking senior partners stood to greet him. Still, Marcus's eyes were drawn to the woman seated at the head of the long mahogany table, Eleanor Vance. Today, she was not a frail, frightened woman. She was poised and elegant, dressed in a sharp, tasteful suit, her eyes full of a warm, genuine light that he recognized instantly. She rose with a grace that defied her age and walked toward him, her hand outstretched. "Marcus," she said, her voice filled with a familiar affection that instantly put him at ease. "It's so good to see you again under much better circumstances." "Mrs. Vance," he stammered, feeling entirely out of his depth. I'm at a loss for words. Thank you is not a big enough word." "There's no need to say anything," she smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "I simply told my husband's partners what I saw. A young man of extraordinary character. Now, it's your turn to show them the architect behind the man." The conversation was unlike any interview he'd ever had. They didn't grill him with technical questions or try to intimidate him. They asked him about his passion, why he chose architecture, and what his vision was for the future of cities. They wanted to know what home meant to him. As he opened his portfolio, a lifetime of nervousness melted away, replaced by the pure, unadulterated love he had for his craft. He didn't just present his work. He told its stories. He spoke about creating buildings with soul, structures that served the people within them, not just the egos of their designers. He explained his design for a library inspired by the structure of a beehive, meant to foster community and collaborative learning. The partners listened intently, their expressions thoughtful and engaged. Seeing the very same thing Eleanor had seen on the station floor, a deep, impressive well of talent grounded in an even more bottomless well of humanity. After he finished, one of the partners, a stern-looking man with kind eyes, looked over his glasses. "Your portfolio is exceptional, Mr. Washington. Truly. But what's more exceptional is you. Finding someone with your level of innate talent, combined with your evident humility, is rare. In our experience, exceedingly rare." Eleanor then told him about her late husband, Julian. He had come from nothing, the son of immigrants, and had faced immense prejudice trying to break into a field that didn't want him. He was given a single chance, a single internship, by a mentor who saw not only his raw talent, but, more importantly, his unimpeachable integrity. "My husband never forgot that one act of faith," Eleanor said softly, her gaze distant for a moment. "He built this entire firm on the principle of paying that kindness forward. He always said, hire for character first. You can teach the skills, but you can't teach the heart. When I saw you turn away from that train for a stranger, Marcus, I didn't just see a kind act. I saw a kind act. I saw the living embodiment of everything Julian believed in. By the end of the meeting, they offered him a job. It wasn't the junior architect position he'd been desperately hoping for at the other firm. It was a coveted, almost mythical spot in their prestigious design incubator program. In this fully salaried 3-year role, he would be mentored directly by the senior partners themselves on major international projects. It was a position that most architects worked their entire careers just to be considered for. Marcus sat there, completely stunned into silence. He had lost a job, but he had just gained a destiny. The next few months were a whirlwind of exhilarating change. Marcus moved into a bright, modern loft apartment in the city, the kind of place with high ceilings and huge windows that he used to sketch in the margins of his notebooks. The very first thing he did before even entirely unpacking was fly his sister Lisa out for a visit. The look of pure, unadulterated pride on her face as she stepped into his new life was a reward greater than any paycheck could ever be. With his first salary deposit, he paid off every last cent of their family's crushing medical debt. The sense of freedom was dizzying. He could finally give Lisa the support and security she had always so selflessly given him. His days were spent at the Vance Architectural Guild, a place that quickly began to feel like home. The work was more challenging than anything he had ever imagined, pushing the limits of his creativity and skill. But for the first time in his professional life, he was no longer facing it alone. He had mentors who guided him, colleagues who inspired him, and a firm that believed in him without reservation. Under their tutelage, he thrived. His designs, once confined to the hopeful pages of his portfolio, began to take shape in the real world. His name started appearing on blueprints for projects that millions would see. He was no longer just trying to be an architect. He was one. He and Eleanor became close, unlikely friends. They developed a cherished ritual of meeting for coffee every Friday afternoon. She was his mentor, his confidant, and a living link to the history of his profession. She shared intimate stories of Julian's early struggles and his greatest triumphs, the rejections he faced, and the principles he never abandoned. In her stories, Marcus found a roadmap for his own journey, a source of profound inspiration and guidance. One crisp autumn afternoon, nearly a year after their fateful meeting at the train station, Marcus took Eleanor to a dusty construction site on the outskirts of the city. It was the community center he had designed during his darkest days, the one from his portfolio. The Vance Guild had loved the design so much that they had partnered with the city to bring it to life. It was his first project, from start to finish. They stood together in hard hats, watching as a massive crane hoisted a steel frame against the bright blue sky. He would have loved this, Eleanor said quietly, her eyes shining as she looked at the rising structure. He always said the best buildings have a good story. And the story of this one, it's about how a single, simple act of goodness can become the foundation for something truly magnificent. Marcus looked at the rising structure, a dream made of steel and concrete, then back at the elegant, kind-hearted woman who had changed his life forever. He had missed his train that day. He had missed his chance. But in missing it, he had found his proper direction, his true north. He learned that life's most important destinations are often reached not by rushing ahead, but by taking an unexpected detour to help someone else along the way. And the strongest, most enduring structures, he now knew, are always built on a foundation of kindness. Marcus Washington's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the universe has a different, grander plan for us than the one we have for ourselves. He thought his entire life depended on catching a single train. Still, his real destiny was waiting for him, not on that train, but in a moment of selfless choice on a chaotic platform. His journey shows that integrity is its own reward, and that genuine kindness has a way of coming back to you in the most unexpected and magnificent ways. Sometimes the most significant opportunities aren't found in rushing forward to claim our prize, but in stopping to help someone else with theirs. If this story inspired you, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove a little bit of kindness can truly change the world.